When you have 4 new tires, every drive feels fresh. Right now, buy 3 select tires and get 1 for just $1 during the Cadillac Certified Service Fresh Start Tire event. Visit Cadillac.com/service offers or see dealer for full details. At participating US GM dealers only, highest or equal value tire will be $1. Offer ends May 31st, 2026. Not available with other offers.
Quiet Riot.
Welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm your host, Andreou. In the iconic words from A Streetcar Named Desire, we've had this date with each other from the beginning. For nearly half of Labour's 20 months in power, it has been said that this set of local elections would mark Starmer's last throw of the dice. With the results still coming in, it is difficult to analyse precise voter movements, but patterns are certainly beginning to emerge. To discuss the results so far, I thought I'd have a cuppa and a chat with my dear friend, Quiet Riot favourite and Guardian columnist, Zoe Williams. Welcome back, Zoe.
Thank you very much.
So the knee-jerk reaction in moments like this is to say this set of results absolutely confirms everything I thought already. So let's break with tradition. What thing that you absolutely thought would happen is failing to materialize? What did you call wrong about this?
The first thing I heard about what had happened was at 20 to 6 this morning, and it was that Wandsworth Council had gone Tory. And I mean, I grew up in Wandsworth and it was always Tory, and I could name all the wards. I've been through the mill with them. There was nobody, I didn't really have any skin in that game because I knew the Greens weren't going to take Wandsworth, but I was gobsmacked. And I did also think, oh my God, if this thing, I didn't think the Tories were going to pick up any votes anywhere. So if this thing has happened and they've actually made a game first thing in the morning, maybe everything I know is wrong. What about you?
I had similar experiences with some of the patches of results that are going the opposite way to everything else. So there's always local issues and things like that. But I guess the main thing I got wrong is the reaction was from Labour people.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah.
It seems that everyone has priced in how horrible this was going to be, that actually everyone's kind of shrugging their shoulders, everyone I know, and some people are even saying, well, it's not as bad as it could have been. So there's this sort of meh attitude coming from a lot of local Labour people that I'm in contact with. It may not be replicated everywhere, but it does seem like there's been the anticipation of this being a horrible, horrible day for Labour for such a long time that now it's finally arrived. It's like...
Yeah, I was listening to the BBC for much longer than I should have done because it's driving me insane. So I basically heard Chris Mason do his one metaphor 9 different times. And it was like, and he was saying of the Labour people, it was like the difference between knowing you have to have root canal treatment and actually having root canal treatment. And they're not acting like people in pain. They're acting like people in the grip of a terrible rage. What I kind of want to avoid in civic life, and I don't know how we avoid this, and I don't know if you can help us, is letting this get into a struggle, a Labour struggle, where the people who want to plough all their energy into killing Greens fight the people who want to plough all their energy into getting rid of Keir. I just feel like I'm being...
And there is a danger of that. There is definitely a danger.
I'm being sucked into the vortex of their emotional... They're like a couple that should have got divorced years ago. They're like, and all being kind of sucked into by centrifugal force.
The way we can do that, the way we can avoid being sucked in, is by not being sucked in, right?
Yeah.
Let's take a breath and let's look at what's in front of us. So let's start with English council elections first to set the scene.
Yes.
So Labour were defending almost 2,600, Tories defending almost 1,400 out of an overall 5,000 or so seats that were up for grabs. So Labour is projected to lose 1,500 of that, so over half. The Conservatives are projected to lose about 620 of that, so just under half. The Liberal Democrats will make just over 90 gains. Greens will make about 200 gains. Reform will be the big winners with 1,800 or so.
Are we sure of that? Because
well, no, that's a projection. The most recent projection based on the results as they've come in so far. It's just where we are at the moment of recording. Just to give an idea of the size and shape of what is going on, because I think you can get lost in hundreds and thousands, and you don't have an idea of what the overall shape is. The overall shape is that up until, well, fewer than 10 years ago, the Tories had nearly 10,000 councillors, and they're now heading for roughly 3,000 councillors. And very similar thing for Labour, who were never as dominant in councils as Tories were. Really, councils belonged to Tories in England. And it's remarkable to see a graph of them sort of from the early 90s and how it goes down. So just to give an overall shape, now, turnout is much higher in England than is usual for this kind of election. Scotland is bucking this trend, and a few other trends, actually, and we will get into both the Senedd and Holyrood elections properly in the second half of this conversation. But to start with, high turnout, on its face, that's great, isn't it? It means more people are engaging.
Oh, God, yeah, I suppose so.
I mean, someone did point out that last time turnout was up by sort of 8 points was in the Brexit referendum.
It was the referendum. Yeah. I mean, I feel like high turnouts are when somebody's made an offer to people who don't normally vote. And I feel like people who don't normally vote are quite susceptible to bullshit offers. So whether that's the bullshit offer of Brexit will make you richer and more in control, or whether it's the bullshit offer of reform will run your council in a way that improves your life, these are not offers that people who are kind of politically engaged would believe. And yet, hey presto, a lot of people who wouldn't normally vote have voted for them.
The counter-argument to that is elections have been left, I guess, to the people who are more politically engaged for several decades, and look at where we are. So how do you filter that, I guess?
No, you're completely right, because whenever somebody makes that argument about the Greens, they're normally saying, oh, these idiots, they're just young and naive people who are voting for the first time. They don't understand why we can't rein in corporate capture. They don't understand why we can't have higher taxes for rich people. They just don't understand. And when people say that, I think, well, screw you, because they might make you understand it one day. But when the boot's on the other foot, of course, I feel kind of desperately sour about it. And at least I can own that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's right. We're having it's a conversation. This is a therapy session, really, for both the two of us and our listeners. And you are seeing that kind of nightmare scenario, not everywhere, but you are seeing it somewhere. Like, I looked at the graph for the Preston Council result, and you had, Labour on 20%, Liberal Democrats on 22%, Greens on 17%, and Reform on 28%. Making gains. And you think, oh, if that were replicated in a first-past-the-post electoral context, you'd get an MP on 28%, when really the vast majority of that constituency does not want a far-right person representing it. How do you stop that? There was a Welsh result declared where Reform had 25,000 votes and were top. But then Plaid Cymru had like 23,000, Labour had 10,000, Greens had 6,000, Lib Dems had 3,000. In a five-party situation, you can have some really random results, basically, can't you?
Yeah, you can have very random results when you've got five parties in a system that was not designed for five parties. I'm taking a number of solid, hopeful narratives from this day. But one of them is this is going to make the argument for electoral reform extremely strong, because you actually can't survive with a system in which, like, one party's insurgency necessitates three other parties' obliteration. It just doesn't make sense. We talk about not believing politicians and finding them untrustworthy and them breaking promises, but you can't just hand over the keys to everything to an insurgency party which has no hinterland, because it's not even their fault when they don't deliver on their promises. They don't even know which promises they couldn't deliver on.
Look, I am all for PR, so I will try and sort of make a counter-argument to that. I don't really believe in it.
Which bit don't you believe in?
I think, no. I mean, I don't really believe in the argument I'm about to make.
Okay.
I want PR. I'm completely with you. But I guess the counter-argument would be that in a two-party system, you are forced into compromise before you vote. In a multi-party system, you are forced into compromise after you vote, because you will end up in various coalitions that none of them get their way on everything. Ultimately, you end up with a similar-ish kind of either broad church party having to make compromises, or smaller parties having to make compromises. So,
well, the thing is, speaking in the broadest possible way, I think what's gone wrong with British politics since Blair, as you say, there used to be, when it was a clash between left and right, when it was a clash between Tory and Labour in the 70s, 80s, early 90s, it was a genuine clash between left and right. Since Blair, there have been various versions of the space of the left being occupied by essentially centrist voices who then tilt left when it comes to election time, only to return to the centre when it comes to governing. And we all say, oh, well, that's what compromise looks like. But you don't see the right making that kind of compromise with either their values or their policies. So really, if you could say to me, first past the post would deliver us back that binary system, except this time one side would genuinely be left, there wouldn't be this kind of calculated excision of left-wing voices, then I would say, okay, maybe I can make my peace with that. But because what we've really been seeing is a dichotomous argument between two political frameworks, which are only pretending to be more different than they actually are. And I don't mean like everybody's a Tory. I think the Tories are really much worse. But I don't think either that any of what we used to consider completely normal version of redistributive social democracy, it's been recast as basically communist adjacent and made verboten. This kind of upheaval is one way to reconfigure the political system so it at least allows in voices.
I agree. I mean, I made my feeble effort to kind of represent the other side, but I agree with you. Ultimately, you want everyone to be able to express themselves democratically through a vote, and you want to give them the broadest range possible of representation. And really, it's through that ghastly whipping system that effectively the supremacy of Parliament has been captured by the executive, which is not necessarily a fantastic thing. So I do agree with you.
This is a historic victory. This is the first time the Green Party have ever won a directly elected mayor. And two-party politics is not just dying, it is dead and it is buried. And actually, whether it's here that Labour have been rejected or whether we're seeing around the country, it's very clear that the new politics is the Green Party versus Reform. I said that the Green Party were going to replace Labour. That's exactly what we did in Gorton and Denton. It's what we've done in Hackney, and we're seeing that right across the country. In fact, in almost all of our seats, right across the country, whether they're target or non-target, the Green Party vote share is rising.
So we spend a lot of time discussing push factors. Starmer coming up on the doorstep, change not being fast enough, the winter fuel allowance, still coming up. I mean, I was talking to people knocking on doors, still comes up more than anything else. So we discuss all of that. The economic recovery is stalling. Of course, there are reasons for that, but who cares? It seems to me that just like voters were dominated by their antipathy for the Conservatives at the last election and didn't care really where they put that, they seem to really dislike Labour now. Like it used to be the case that people would tell you, I don't want to talk to you, and that would be that. Now they want to talk to you. They want to tell you how much they dislike what the Labour government is doing, which is quite embarrassing to stand there as a sort of observer and hear Labour people getting that from voters. But then for a voter to decide, I'm going to vote Green or Reform or Plaid Cymru, there must also be pull factors towards those parties. And that is, I think, something that we discuss a lot less. So what are the pull factors, do you think?
I think that there are three different things going on there. With Plaid, there was basically a mass movement in Caerphilly when they had that by-election against reform and everything it stood for. And people were genuinely wondering which way to coalesce. If a lot of people with a lot of different kind of specific political values, but broadly the same progressive values, wanted to vote the same way. And Plaid now has that momentum behind it. It's just got the hunch that if you don't know how all your neighbours are going to vote, just go Plaid and that will probably be okay. And the thing with that kind of energy is that it really persists. So there isn't another party offering kind of what Labour might once have been offering with a realistic chance, people with enough local credentials to actually do the legwork. So it's not a dumb choice at all. Reform's pull factor is really straightforward. And I talked to a lot of people for this column we do in The Guardian called Dining Across the Divide who are thinking of going reform. That's how they ended up on the other side of the table. They are genuinely saying, we will deliver growth, restore this nation to its greatness, and end or curtail or severely limit immigration. And loads of people offer that. The Labour Party spends half of its time offering that The Tory party spends all of its time offering that. It's not a new offer, although it's framed and phrased in a much, much more unpleasant neo-fascist way, and it goes much further. They're going to reform because that's what they want, and they've seen the two other parties claim to do it and fail.
Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot.
Immigration figures will come in this year, and from what I hear from friends in the civil service, will be significantly in the minus.
What? Because everybody's taking one look at us and going, oh, I don't like the look of that.
Well, for whatever reasons, either lots of British people emigrating or fewer people coming, whatever the reason is, we're looking at minus 250,000 at the end of this year if the pattern persists as it has been going. So will people then take notice of that and say, okay, so they seem to have sorted that bit?
Well, I think the thing is that it's not really about, it is like Brexit all over again, and how we kept on going, oh, this will hit prosperity, and people said it's not really about the numbers. I don't think it's really about the numbers with migration. Even if you say that, you know, the migration figures have come right down, Labour's obviously got on top of this, people are still going to say they've brought down the wrong kind of migration, they don't have a plan for small boats, they don't have this, they don't have that. There's no way of the Labour Party, Shabana Mahmood or no Shabana Mahmood, ever being as unpleasant as reform are. There's just no way for them to do that. There's no way for them to say, we're going to put all the illegals in your area in a camp, except it's going to be in a green constituency, not our constituency. They just are never going to be able to mimic them to that extent. So I don't think the numbers will make any difference.
You see, my feeling is that we are trying to find a lot more deliberative logic where there isn't some. My sense is that these movements are a lot more instinctive. We're trying to find out why voters are going from party X to party Y, when a lot of the time it's like those murmurations of starlings, that something frightens them suddenly and they move and they seem to make a shape. They seem to create a pattern, but it's not a result of individual rational decisions. It just looks like something. People seem just incredibly grumpy. The only parallel I can use to describe it, they're like a casting audition panel that's very close to lunch. Just shouts, next! The moment you open your mouth.
Yeah.
No, we voted for you. No, it doesn't seem to be working. Next one. We'll try the next one.
I thought a lot about this and I know why I feel really let down by Keir Starmer, because he explicitly lied to my wing of the party, if you like. So I was profoundly disaffected and disillusioned from the minute he took office, pretty much. And it's only got worse since then. You know, I expected him to have not been truthful about his offer, which was Jeremy Corbyn in a tie, but I didn't expect him to be so bad at the kind of politics he likes. And I didn't expect him to be so ineffective at getting those policies across. And I didn't expect, you know, all the tawdry stuff, the Peter Mandelson, I didn't expect. The line on Gaza from a human rights lawyer, I couldn't have seen that coming. But I still understood how me and people like me felt the way they did. But what I didn't understand is how everybody in the country felt the same way. I mean, it's just extraordinary the way he can unite a football crowd, he can unite lefties, he can unite the right, of course. He's almost become like the political version of seaside humour. The one thing that we can all agree on, even the one we've got nothing else in common.
David Lammy made a decent effort at defending Starmer early yesterday evening. Let's have a little listen.
The clear picture from the doorstep this time round is tough. It's tough because we've got the backdrop of the crisis and the Iran war, the Strait of Hormuz, meaning that people can feel a sort of tightening amidst already a cost of living crisis. And of course, there's been the Peter Mandelson issue.
Multiple sources have told our colleagues in BBC Wales that you're going to lose the Senate. A former Welsh minister has already said if it's that bad, then Keir Starmer should go.
Well, let's be clear. You don't get rid of the pilot mid-flight because of a bit of turbulence. All incumbent governments face tough midterms.
It's not a bit of turbulence, though, is it? There seems to be quite a personal dislike for Starmer. Now, like you, I struggle to understand why it's so widespread, simply because in my mind, grey, dull people, I don't expect them to excite such strong emotions. Especially in the case of Starmer, I know this isn't the case for you, but most people elected him because he was a bit of a grey blank slate. And now they really dislike him for precisely the reason they elected him. which seems impetuous, I guess, by voters as a group. Do you think he would ever resign so close to another roll of the dice? I mean, he's got a King's Speech coming up. Or has he shown himself to be the sort of personality that will go one more reset? Maybe this one will work. Basically, is Labour going to have to kick him out?
I mean, I don't really understand why he's so determined. The one thing that his inner circle, and I'm putting kind of air quotes around that for everybody who can't see me, which is everybody, because he doesn't really have an inner circle. But the one thing that people who know him say is that he's absolutely determined not to step down. That baffles me, because the one thing about him was that he was DPP, he's used to taking soundings, consulting, being very iterative. His whole shtick was, I'm not an ideologue, I just like things that work. And you're like, well, this obviously isn't working. Where is pragmatic Starmer? Where is consultative Starmer, who listens to people around him? He's suddenly become like a zealot in the service of his own prime ministership, which I do find strange.
It is strange. I mean, the only thing I can think of that might be going on in the background is that he feels a sense of personal duty in terms of international affairs being so complicated and sensitive and horrible at the moment that maybe he's thinking it would be a dereliction of my duty to the country to leave at this point. So maybe he's trying to craft some other sort of legacy. But just before we got on to record, there are now universal rumors that Eleanor Morgan, the Welsh Labour leader, will actually lose her seat. So she won't be re-elected. And there's even persistent drip feeding of the notion that even Anna Sawa might lose his seat. The BBC are reporting that he might actually lose his seat. I mean, if both the Welsh Labour leader and the Scottish Labour leader end up losing their seats, Starmer has to step down, doesn't he?
I mean, I think if it hadn't been for Anna's calling for his resignation 6 weeks ago, he would probably be more upset about that.
Yeah. Shot his bolt too soon in some ways, Sawa, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't the most politic intervention. But everybody in my back channels thinks that Labour is done for in Scotland and Wales. So I think that would have been priced into the speech he gave this morning. But the speech he gave this morning was, I thought, almost nonsensical. I'm not the kind of person who backs down when things get tough. It's like you're trying to throw somebody out of a nightclub and they're like, I'm not the kind of person who deserts the sinking ship. And you're like, well...
Mate, the evening is over.
Yeah, exactly. We're turning the lights on.
For me, the remarkable thing is not the collapse of the Labour vote or the collapse of the Tory vote. It's the collapse of the two in conjunction between them. The notion that the two big parties, if I can call them that still, will not get to 40% between them is really, really quite extraordinary. And there is no way to spin it, I don't think. And I think it has a disproportionate effect on what's going on, because ordinarily, you see, at this stage of the electoral cycle, people would vote for the opposition party if they were unhappy with the party of government. We cannot underestimate the extent to which the Tories being absent from this fight is affecting what's going on.
That's what John Curtis always says, that really the best thing for Labour would be if the Tories recovered, because then they could lose votes to the Tories and the Tories could lose votes to Reform. And it would be a three-way split that Labour might just get in with. Yeah.
Because at the moment, they're not even splitting the vote, are they?
The other thing that John Curtis said, which I quite liked, I thought was elegant, was when will parties ever understand that the people you lose to aren't necessarily the people who are taking your votes?
Yeah.
And that's really the bind Labour's got into. It keeps losing to Reform, so it thinks it has to be more like Reform. But it's not Reform voters who are taking their votes.
I was looking at some research earlier, and really the party that is pommeling Labour is I'm staying at home. That's what's taking the most votes from Labour.
Yeah.
But Tory MPs have somehow, in the last 2 months, convinced themselves that Badenoch is terrific, which is insane.
I'm quite impressed by them, though. You know, they're plucky. They're like Scrappy-Doo. They're like they just won't take no for an answer.
There's still a lot of listening that my party needs to do. We've already started to set out some of the plans for the future, like our cheap energy plan, our plan for drivers, but we've still got a long way to go to rebuild trust with people.
Well, that's interesting. So you say you still have to do a lot of listening, but Kemi Badenoch's already had nearly two years.
No, well, she's not had nearly 2 years. It's not even 2 years since the general election. Her poll ratings are still ahead of the parties at the moment, and this is about us rebuilding our brand as well as her leadership. And she is polling above every other political leader, but our brand, because of some of that baggage, is still there. And, you know, it's a conversation I have on a doorstep week in, week out. Obviously,
well, actually, by quite a lot of measures, she actually polls behind Sir Ed Davey. He's quite regularly.
Only because nobody knows who he is, though. If you look at the don't knows, there's a huge amount for the Lib Dem leader and the Green leader, but for Kemi and for Nigel and for the Prime Minister.
But do you acknowledge, though, by some measures, that Ed Davey actually quite consistently comes
because
ahead
so many
of
people don't know who he is. If you look at the polls, then they just don't know who he is. So it's difficult to ascertain whether somebody's polling ahead if nobody knows who they are.
You know, I've been watching their media rounds today, and they go around every studio claiming that every single result is about national politics, about the country's dislike for Starmer, about, you know, all of that stuff. And then when it comes to their results, they're like, no, Kemi's great. You can't claim that every other result is about the leader of every other party and national politics. And then when it comes to you getting obliterated, really, claim that you've got it absolutely right.
No. But also, it does make you realise that, you know, the Tories, basically, when you look at these results, the only rational conclusion is everybody who used to vote Tory now votes Reform, which gives the lie to what I thought post-Brexit was that there was a huge number of moderate, one nation, fair-minded Tories who are now politically homeless. I think that was wrong. I think maybe those people were tolerated by the Tory machine and were never really the point.
Quiet Riot.
I wrote a little song to remind you, Choice Hotels get you more of the experiences you value. The Cambria Hotel's got it all. A rooftop bar, have a ball. Bring a date, your squad, or even your mom. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
Quiet Riot.
Again, John Curtis has been pointing out that the biggest correlator in the result you're seeing is actually the Brexit vote.
Well, I think the reason why we are asking ourselves whether Reform will indeed win Barnsley and Sunderland, whether they will indeed win Essex, where we've already got quite a lot of results, is that these are some of the most pro-Leave parts of England. And it's very, very clear from these results that Reform support is primarily concentrated, and their advance in support is primarily concentrated in places that voted for Brexit in 2016. And this is consistent with the evidence of the opinion polls that basically around half of those people who voted Leave in 2016 are now backing Nigel Farage. And so, although, I mean, a lot of your spokespersons from other parties are saying, well, people are upset and they're unhappy and about the failure to turn around the economy, public service, etc. All of that is true. But as it were, that is the thing that is pushing people away from some of the mainstream parties. But what is attracting them to Reform as well is the fact that they are Brexiteers, that they are more broadly people with a relatively socially conservative outlook. And it's the combination of the two things, being upset, having lost confidence in the traditional mainstream parties, and having sympathy for some of the views and issues that Reform emphasise, that helps to identify Reform voters. Now, I think in truth, it's that many of the mainstream parties would go on to say, well, but that is only a section of British society. It's never going to command the kind of 40% support that we've traditionally expected a governing party to command. I suspect that that is true, but in our fragmented politics, as has already been illustrated, 26% of the vote across the country can be enough still to put you firmly in first place. In other words, we have to rethink our assumptions about what parties need to achieve and whether or not they need to be broad coalitions as opposed to parties that particularly appeal to a particular section of voters for so long as we have this fragmented party system.
Liberal Democrats, I think not enough is said. I mean, I find it infuriating.
Not enough is ever said about the Liberal Democrats.
But I find them infuriating because they have simply declined to find a leader, a format that might excite people. I genuinely think they are the party who have done the worst in the last 2 years in a strange way, in that the pitch is rolled perfectly for them, and they just refuse to put on a fucking shirt. They just keep saying, no, we'll build slowly like we've always done. And it's like there's a massive opportunity in front of you.
Basically, they've got a problem with their brand, which is just persistent. But the problem with it is that they come off as centrists, even when they're way more radical than Labour. They come off as really mild and a bit boring, even when they're saying way more trenchant things than anybody else. You know, it's like Ed Davey has made some genuinely good interventions about Donald Trump, about Elon Musk, about the state of the world, about, you know, the environment. He says things that I want to hear, but I just can't hear it from them as a party for some reason. And I think I think it's historical and emotional. And I wonder how much of that is to do with the coalition sellout. It pains me to say it because nobody seems to have very long memories in politics. But I think everybody does remember that, like, that party, when it comes to it, they're always the minor party and they always give in.
Yeah, it's interesting. So basically, in the search for someone that hasn't had a go yet, Tories and Labour are out of the equation because they've plainly had loads of goes in the last few decades.
Yeah.
And the Liberal Democrats are also excluded because of that 5-year coalition.
Yeah.
They are seen as someone who did have a go.
Yeah, I think so.
Is that what you think?
I think so, yeah. And it's really hard on them because loads of people have made way worse mistakes than Nick Clegg, but he's the one that just stays in the memory.
Yeah. Let's have a little listen to that incredibly awkward moment of Victoria Atkins next to Robert Jenrick in the studio.
There are people who are making promises in politics that they do not back up with how they're going to pay for it and deliver it.
What do you say to that, Robert Jenrick?
Look, this is a truly historic morning. We are seeing the complete rejection of the two old parties, and for good reason. You know, the Conservatives failed because they promised secure borders and a strong economy. Actually, they delivered open season on the borders and stagnating economic growth back home. Labour promised change, and it's just been more of the same. And Reform is emerging today as the only truly national party in this country.
Is that true,
the only party that can unite the country.
Robert and I haven't actually spoken to each other since I supported his leadership. So I'm surprised that he's so quick to can all of the work that he did when he was in government as immigration minister, but also the work that we were trying to do since the general election in order to rebuild. Because we know that mistakes were made in government. Rob was part of the team that made those mistakes in Parliament.
Look, if the Conservative spokesperson today is coming on to say that this is a great success and that all the work that they've been doing in Parliament has paid dividends, then I'm afraid
in terms of U-turns.
You need to give your head a shake. What's actually happened here is, unfortunately, for the Conservatives, and I was a part of the party, as you know, for a long time, the trust is completely and utterly gone. People do not want to return to the Conservative Party. It is a dead party. It is only going to exist in pockets of enormous affluence in places like central London. And the point is this: if you want to get rid of Labour and you want to have real change in this country, it is now obvious for everyone to see that you have to rally behind Nigel Farage and Reform. There is no viable path whatsoever to the Conservative Party winning the next general election.
You two worked very, very closely together for quite some time, didn't you? This is the first time that we have you reunited. This is the first time you've spoken, sitting here.
Rob has not spoken to me since he left the Conservative Party in the way that he did, and I considered us to be very good friends. And so it has been a great personal loss for me as well as a professional one. The reason I raise this is because I think how one conducts oneself is important, and I think that people are asking the voters for trust, then that has to be genuine.
The way you have trust in politics is to do what you say you're going to do.
I'm talking about the personal point.
But this is the point here.
Can we just start there?
The question at the end of the day in politics,
actually a very personal
the
point.
question is about honesty and trustworthiness. Because the public want change. They're not going to get change from the old parties.
Can I just ask you on a very personal level? Because Victoria Atkins has made very personal points about how closely you work, and this is the first time that you've sat together.
Sophie, I don't personalise things. You know, what I'm interested in is the country. I want the country to succeed.
But the country needs to be able to trust
many,
you.
many millions of people across the country who are seeing in these elections feel angry and frustrated. And that is why they're coming to Reform, because they can see that this is the last chance for the country to fix things.
You say trust is important, but isn't trust in character important?
Yes.
So Vicky campaigned for you in your 2014 by-election in Newark. I remember that. She supported your leadership in 2024. And the criticism from people like Vicky in the Shadow Cabinet is that you were sitting in Shadow Cabinet meetings, sort of taking notes, and when you did your big reform announcement, out you came with those private Shadow Cabinet discussions. That's about trusting character,
I have been very clear for a very long time. I campaigned to change our immigration laws under Rishi Sunak, then resigned from Cabinet. Stood for the leadership of the Conservative Party. Let me finish my point, Victoria, if I may. I then stood for the leadership of the Conservative Party, saying it had to fundamentally change, to admit the mistakes it had made, be a different party.
You were a cabinet minister that signed off the immigration policies of Boris Johnson. That is a fact, Rob.
But we can argue over the past if you want to. I don't get into that kind of thing.
So I think that's actually quite indicative of the psychology in the Tory party at the moment. I think they are quite a bit more bruised than people might think. And it seems to me the story for months has been predicted to be Starmer's resignation right after this, but it might turn out to be a sort of mass exodus of Tory MPs to reform, because they just seem really terrified. And the sort of areas, in Midlands and Essex, and where they're losing loads of voters, I mean, they will make a lot of Tory MPs very nervous.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everybody's going to be very nervous, because one of the striking results, which I hadn't really processed, was the Labour losses in seats where Labour MPs felt safe is going to make all those Labour MPs feel as unsafe as the unsafest Labour MP. So Tories and Labour MPs are probably people to watch for being spooked. And the only sign that they're spooked will be, as you say, mass defections from the Tories and a pressure for Starmer to go from Labour.
Mm-hmm. You also have people like Jacob Rees-Mogg doing the media rounds today, openly advocating for what he calls a coupon election, where the Tories and Reform actively and publicly collaborate and say, you take this seat, I'll take that, because he wants to consolidate the right-wing vote, basically. So I think that's always a danger.
We had Robert Jenrick on earlier, who said that the Conservative Party is dead.
Well, I heard Robert say that. I think it's rather rum to say that when you wanted to be leader of the party relatively recently. So I think he's obviously got a particular axe to grind. But I think what this shows is the need to reunite the right. I've noticed that John Curtis has been saying that Reform is doing extraordinarily well in places that voted Leave in the referendum. The Conservatives are still doing well in places that were the less Leave voting areas. If you combine that, it's an unstoppable force in British politics against a divided left and a sort of moribund Labour Party. Again, John Curtis is pointing out that they haven't been necessarily losing votes directly to Reform. It's that their votes have been going down and Reform has been consolidating the right votes. I think that's an important part of this. I'm interested in uniting the right, and so Reform doing well and taking lots of seats off Labour, seats that the Conservatives would have been most unlikely to win, seems to me to make it a good thing for what I would call the broad Tory family, rather than specifically for the Conservative Party.
When you talk about uniting the right, some sort of coalition between Reform and the Conservative Party, is that the way forward?
Yes, I would favour a coupon election at the next general election, with people having a clear view that the Conservatives and Reform are working together.
Typically for Jacob Rees-Mogg, he's using a fancy Eton word and he hasn't looked up what it means. Coupon election is when you choose a single thing, because a lot of people suggested this for the 2017 election after Brexit. Mm-hmm. So you say, who's the candidate most likely to oppose Brexit, and you vote for them. And it works out as a kind of tactical voting thing. But what would their coupon issue be, you see? If you wanted the Tories and Reform to do a kind of, dice it up between them and say, if you want this, vote, but turquoise in this constituency and blue in this one, their headline offer is now nothing but cheap xenophobia and mad promises. So it's who can be the most horrible about migrants, whether they've lived here for 2 generations or whether they just arrived. I'd love to see them put that on a coupon, frankly, because then at least we'd know, then at least they would be honest about what we're dealing with.
Now, one of the lines that Reform is trotting out in a plainly coordinated way is to call themselves a startup party or an insurgent or an outfit that has no history beyond the last couple of years.
It's so annoying.
And there was a very funny moment where one of them, started saying UKIP is back, and the journalist had to correct him and say, you're not UKIP anymore, you're Reform now.
Our message is UKIP's here, working hard with local communities. Sorry, Reform is here, working hard with local communities. And I've been doing this for the last 15 years, from the UKIP days all the way through to Reform.
Do you think that is likely to work with voters? I mean, we keep wanting people, I guess, to make the connection between this man who sold them Brexit that has done a huge amount of damage to the country and not buy the next elixir that he's selling. But people are still queuing up, aren't they?
I mean, look, I think the really unlovely lessons of the past 10 years for British politicians has been that they're not punished for inconsistency. They're not punished for things they said in the past. So you had that whole long period when Boris Johnson was suddenly really flagrantly anti-immigration, whereas 6 years before as London Mayor, he'd been talking about shaking the cornflake box and getting all the brightest and best talent from wherever in the world out of his cornflake box. I actually can't remember what the metaphor was. It was so stupid. Then you had the Michael Gove levelling up, which delivered no levelling up. He was never called on that. You've had so much, not even consistency, but complete volte-faces, which they never. You might get the odd Today presenter calling them on it, but nobody actually ever punished them for it at the ballot box. So they've learned to completely forget intellectual probity. They've learned that it doesn't matter. And it's just sad. Sorry.
Look, Harlow, Bexley, Isle of Wight, it hasn't all gone Reform's way. Those were top targets where they claimed they could take them and they didn't. Peter Kellner wrote something that I found interesting. He's saying that Reform won over 41% of all the seats they contested last year this time, and only 33% so far is the ratio of conversion this year, which is in line with their dip in the polls, actually, because this time last year they were on 31%, and they're now on an average of 26%. So is that copium, do you think, or is that a reasonable point that actually underneath the sound and fury and claims of earthquakes, there is a slight decline?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I read that and I thought, well, does that, though, make it impossible for them to form a government? Because that's where all the energy is now. It's like, how scared should you be? And it doesn't make it impossible for them to form a government. If the Greens carry on the rise, and that takes a massive bite out of Labour's support, and yet they never reach critical mass to overtake Labour, there is a floor beneath which you couldn't form a government.
We will see constituencies like the one I described, where you have Labour, the Greens and Lib Dem round about 20%, and Reform taking the seat with sort of 28%.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be really scary for the political landscape, because it would seed huge dissatisfaction with the elected representative in an environment where Trump-like Reform don't care about people who don't agree with them. You know, they're the opposite of Mamdani with that I govern for all New Yorkers. I only govern for people who hate the woke. That would be a horrible, quite aside from the crypto interests of capital that they would serve in the interests of, that would be a horrible outcome. The politics of a government that hates over half of the electorate is just so grim and horrible.
Grim.
Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot.
Here's an extraordinary exchange between Matt Goodwin and the Lib Dems' Munira Wilson.
Matt, Munira says you're offering divisive politics and that's why Reform is making progress.
Well, the opposite is true, in fact. There's nothing more divisive than treating the British people like second-class citizens in their own country. There's nothing more divisive than what we've got with a policy of open borders, a policy of mass uncontrolled immigration, trying to scrap jury trials, trying to shut down people's free speech. The reason that we at Reform are doing so well today, the reason that we are reshaping the map of British politics, is because we've connected with the decent majority of hard-working, tax-paying, law-abiding British people who have had enough of being treated like second-class citizens in their own country. And what's remarkable to me is the reach of Reform. It's not just down the east coast of England, Essex and Kent anymore. It's into the northern Labour heartlands. Lisa Nandy, who has been very critical of Reform. You know, Lisa Nandy called Reform a fascist party not that long ago. Well, Lisa Nandy just woke up and discovered that we just won every single seat but one in Wigan.
Munira?
Reform are riding a wave of distrust and anger with traditional politics and politicians. I think the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. As Reform start to run more and more councils, let's see whether they are going to actually deliver on the bread and butter issues that actually impact people's lives. As local councillors, you're not going to be able to stop the boats. You're going to have to fix potholes, make sure you collect the bins and ensure that vulnerable adults and children get social care and their special educational needs are looked after.
Why is it so problematic to say that we should control our borders? Why is it so problematic to say it's not acceptable that the British people are being forced to spend £15 billion on accommodation for people who are breaking our laws? Can you just explain to me what is divisive about that? Saying that we should put the tax-paying forgotten majority first.
I didn't say that it's unacceptable to talk about immigration. What I said is that local elections, immigration is not an issue that you can influence. In the same way that with the Greens campaigning on Gaza, these councils don't need a foreign policy. People want their potholes fixed.
Is it too soon for them? Or is that me, again, trying to cope with this surge? That it seems to me that a party that lacks substance and experience in governing and is not doing great in areas where they are in charge. And actually, they have done worse in areas like Kent, where they are in charge. I will look into the precise figures for Sunday school. Would it have been better in many ways for them to ride the vibes wave to a general election without the time in between to have their performance assessed?
Well, this is what I was thinking, that this is the other lining on the cloud, was that the best way to deal with a snake oil salesman is to buy the snake oil and put it on some sensitive part of your body and discover that not only does it not work, but it actually has some pretty horrible side effects. The closer you get to reform, the more you discover that its members have been in the BNP before, or they don't know what they're doing, or they aren't really interested in adult social care, or they don't think you deserve to have your bins collected. It's not a fluffy, clubbable party. It's got some very nasty elements, and people don't want to be schooled in that. They don't want to be told that by Emily Maitlis or either of us, but they're not dumb either. They can figure it out for themselves if they're up close to it.
So Wales, we will do much more of Wales with Naomi on Sunday school because, like I said, we only have a clutch of results in at the moment. The projections right now, the high end is that Clyde might get 46, which puts them only 2 short of a working majority, and the Greens might get 2. But that is the very high end of the projection. In the more median scenarios, they will need Labour's help in a partnership. And Labour I don't think, have ever been the junior party in any partnership. So psychologically, like, how will they slide into that? Can you see them doing that?
No, I mean, they'll find it, for exactly the same reason they find it really hard to have a conversation about PR. There's something kind of profoundly aggressive in the party where they think the way they win is the only way they'll ever win. And so I think they'd find it really hard to conceive of compromise and hybrid politics, if you like.
I read a fascinating piece of research that suggested, in a sort of roundabout way, that the pandemic basically did for Labour in Wales. Why? Because the awareness of the powers the Welsh Assembly has and the First Minister has shot up during the pandemic. So apparently only 25% of people in Wales knew who Mark Drakeford was before the pandemic. And by the end of the pandemic, it was 90%. And it was during that period that people in Wales thought, shit, these people have actual powers. You know, there are a lot of devolved areas, and started looking at Welsh government quite a bit more seriously. You know, not the politically engaged people, but sort of a layer beyond that. And I found that very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. It's a bit like, do you remember early days of Twitter? If you were really quiet, your followership just built and built and built. And then as soon as you started talking, you'd lose a load of followers. And it's just because people had forgotten about you. And then they remembered and found you annoying.
That's absolutely right. Scotland.
Yes.
Again, we will do a lot more on Sunday, but it's bucking quite a lot of the trends in that turnout is slightly down from before, which is certainly not what we're seeing elsewhere. And also the sort of anti-incumbent bias that we're seeing everywhere, like everywhere in the world. The SNP are battling it in a sort of magnificent way, I think, after such a long time in government. So what do you think is going on there?
I mean, I think they've got, worst of all, they've got Devil in the Deep Blue Sea blues, right? There isn't really an insurgent party. Scotland has always been better at resisting xenophobic out-group narratives than England has anyway. So reform never got ahead of steam. The Greens haven't done terribly in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, they're a separate entity from the Green Party of England and Wales, just because of the way they're set up. But yeah, they seem to be doing all right. Again, you see enclaves of very odd results, but the trend seems to be that Reform are replacing the Conservatives in Scotland just like they're replacing them everywhere else. Is that actually going to turn out to be a big advantage? The fact that if you're a right-wing voter, you have one really clear option to rally behind.
Yeah. They've also got the kind of contrarian thing going on as well. They don't want to do the same as England is doing. I mean, are tartan Tories even still a thing? What would it take for the right to have a resurgence in Scotland?
again, so far, because we don't have the full results in, but so far the combined share of Reform and Conservative is higher than it's been for the Conservatives on their own at any point. So the right-leaning vote is up in Scotland if you look at it as a total.
I mean, this is actually depressing me.
I'm sorry.
Are we looking at such widespread disaffection with the left offer that people have actually literally changed their spots? Could that have happened?
Okay, so I'll give you my theory, all right, since we're coming to the end of this conversation. I think what we are seeing is a kind of feeding frenzy. And again, I think there is a danger of overreading the logic of what is going on. Like, you look at Manchester, you know, despite being a Labour hold, because it was only ever going to be a third of councillors who were up for grabs. I mean, Labour is down 35% on 31 now. The Greens are on 37%. So the Greens are on a higher total percentage of votes than Labour. In Manchester, the remaining of that is going to Reform, who are on 26%. And the Tories are -6%, and the rest of it has come from Labour. So it feels like what you have is those two old party sort of carcasses in the water, and everyone is nibbling on them. Everyone is taking chunks off, which makes it almost impossible to triangulate a political response, because if you turn slightly one way, you're exposing more of your flank to someone else. And that's why it feels like it's different from when, you know, the SDP Liberal Alliance did very well, or when the Brexit Party did very well in the European election. This feels different because there are a lot of people taking chunks of them from many different directions. And I can't see how you stem that. I can't see how you stop that.
I mean, I love your theory. When we call politics febrile at the moment, there's a frothy atmosphere where things can turn on a sixpence. But this is ridiculous, you know. It's like, I know the referendum was 10 years ago, sure, but there was a surge of general statement and restatement of progressive values, even after the Scottish referendum, then after them voting for kind of anti-Brexit and us voting for it and dragging the whole Four Nations out. There was another surge of progressive kind of coalition. I cannot believe that just the experience has like sucked the life out of the ability in Scotland to form a progressive alliance. I just can't believe it.
Well, I guess it hasn't, in that the SNP will still be the biggest party and they will look to make a deal. The counter-argument to what you're saying might be, is this a better model of democracy? Like, we kick against it because it's not what we're used to, but is one of the things being realized subliminally en masse by voters that it's quite healthy to have different parties in charge of different areas and different levels of government pressuring for your interests and fighting with each other? Might voters be making, in fact, much more sophisticated choices than they get credit for without even realizing it?
So do you think this is like actually devolution? This is kind of emotional devolution in action?
In a way, I don't want to credit it with a level of sophistication that I just said isn't there. But what I'm saying is people learn behaviors. And if they learn that actually having a council that is scrappy with their county council, that is scrappy with their national parliament, that is scrappy with Westminster, works better at making more money and better policy flowing into their area, maybe there is a level of learning there that says, the worst possible thing would be to go back to a situation where you take my vote for granted. So I'm going to behave very erratically so that you start paying attention. We are like children kind of acting out because we're not getting the attention we deserve.
My worry is that politics responds to that kind of libidinal energy by just making promises it doesn't fulfill. It doesn't say, okay, we really need to think hard about delivering in order to keep this show on the road. It just thinks, well, if they'll vote this way on this day and then 18 months later vote a completely different way, and they'll punish us for things that weren't our fault, but they'll reward us for statements that we can't fulfill, it creates a chimeric politics in which nothing is real and everything is vibes.
Zoe, That was quite a conversation, wasn't it? Always a joy to geek out with you. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me. Sorry that I don't know yet. I don't even know my own feelings
one knows yet. No one knows yet, and that's the point. The point is, people listening will get hopefully comfort from hearing other people trying to work these things out, and maybe they'll agree with some of it and disagree with some of it. But the point is, no one has the answers, and if they pretend that they have the answers, then give them wide berth. So listeners, if you like our work, you should consider supporting our work. You can do so for less than the price of a pint by going to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod. We shall reconvene on Sunday when Naomi and myself will do the full data dive and election wash-up proper. But in the meantime, these were our very raw, ruminative thoughts. Thank you for listening.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simone Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.